Building Your Brand Ideas for Entrepreneurs, prepared for and presented at the 2014 Square One Entrepreneurship Training Program. Square One is a program of the Center for Emerging Technologies. CET is an affiliate of the Cortex Innovation Community. Square One is funded in part by the Missouri Technology Corporation.
Did everybody get a chance to get some of the chocolate? Francis, you didn't hold any back, did you? Great. Well, good afternoon, or I should say good night. Welcome. First of all, by a show of hands, those of you that selected Hershey's, raise your hand. Okay. Tell me, when you think of Hershey's, what comes to mind? Marvin.
Willy Wonka.
Willy Wonka. Gizem.
Kiss chocolate.
Chocolate. Phyllis, when you think of Hershey's, what words describe Hershey?
Inexpensive chocolate.
Who else selected Hershey? Yes.
Kissing
Don.
my wife.
I'm sorry?
When I see Hershey, I say kissing my wife.
Kissing your wife. Okay. Harry.
So, kind of a mainstream brand for the average Joe.
Great. Anybody else? One more.
Childhood dreams.
Thanks, Paul. Childhood dreams. Okay. By a show of hands, who selected Ghirardelli? Okay, I would expect more to be selecting Ghirardelli. I'm jading you. Paul, how would you describe Ghirardelli?
Rich.
Okay. Who else? He says rich. Quality. Elegant. Anybody else? Okay, what this exercise we just did was really to describe the brands for Hershey and Ghirardelli. You all are marketers, you can go home now. But really, the branding didn't happen just overnight. They worked very hard, spent a lot of resources, both dollar and time, to be able to instill in you the perception of those products. If you go on their websites, I will bet the way they are projecting out messaging, both Ghirardelli as well as Hershey, is what you just described. So today what I want to do, I know you don't have the resources that Ghirardelli as well as Hershey has, but I want to give you some tips on how you can build your brand, okay? So let's go to the journey. First of all, I want to start with telling you why it's important to brand. You know, what's the importance of branding? After talking about, and then what is branding? Branding is not just a logo. From there, I want to talk about how you develop some key messaging and positioning, externally as well as internally. From there, how you develop a company name, a logo, and a tagline. Now, I realize some of you are further along than others, so hopefully this will be a refresher, or maybe you need to rework your branding, okay? First of all, why do you need branding? It provides differentiation. We all keep talking about differentiation. There's so much in the marketplace, so many products that look to be a commodity. You really want to differentiate yourself. You can do that through branding. It minimizes the time and money required to constantly explain who you are. That's very difficult. And then makes you look professional, bigger than you really are, okay? It helps your company ambassadors. When I say company ambassadors, let me explain. One of the buzzwords we're all hearing now is influencer marketing. Because of YouTube and Twitter, Instagram, there's people constantly talking about products and services. You want to make sure you have a consistent brand and that you're controlling the messaging, especially with this influencing marketing going on right now. And it prevents your competitors from really defining your business or even your market itself. So it's important that you control the messaging, and you can do that with your branding. Your brand is not a logo. As a marketer, I cringe anytime somebody says, oh, branding, you mean developing the logo? A brand is not a logo. It's a component of, a logo is not the brand. It's a component of. When we say brand, it's really the emotional corporate image. Let's go back to the exercise we did. The exercise, when I asked you to describe Hershey's or Ghirardelli's, how many of you talked about the logo? Did anybody? No, it's not the brand. Logo just is a marker, an icon that you use to describe the product. It's important, but the most important thing is that it's emotional corporate image as a whole. That's what branding is. So let me go into further about branding. A brand is really a representation of an organization's DNA. It's a set of promises you make to your customers and your clients. It's an explanation of how you're different. More importantly, why would they want to buy from you? We all hear about the WIFM rule. Who knows what the WIFM rule is? Yes. Right. We all have, most people have ADD nowadays, so you better tell me what I need to hear. Okay? What's in it for me? How do you want to be perceived in the marketplace? And key messaging that connects customers, connects you to the customers. That's what branding is. Let's go a little deeper. Here's some products, consumer products, as well as products in general that have done a great job with branding. I think we'll all agree when you see the Volvo logo, you think, and hear of Volvo, you think of safety. Apple, innovation. Nike, performance. It's all about winning. And then finally, Maytag. That refrigerator you get, you know it's going to last forever because it's a Maytag. These companies obviously have spent a lot of resources, but I'll bet they started where we're going to start today. It's really trying to determine who you are, what you want to be, and message that out. Okay? Clear positioning and messaging is where I suggest you start. My wife, a couple weeks ago, got a coupon from Reynolds Wrap in the mail, and she showed me this message right below that was on the coupon. For Reynolds Wrap, from prepping, cooking, and serving to storage and disposal, we provide convenient solutions for busy households. Wow. As a marketer, I looked at that and said, they know who their customer is, they know what problem they're solving, and they know their features and benefits. What great external messaging. Part of this messaging is part of, you can get to this messaging through one tip I would suggest, which is actually forming and developing a communications platform. If you look in your binder, you should have a worksheet. What I call a communication platform is really a vehicle by which you complete to be able to assist those people that are assisting you in building your brand. So it may be someone who's developing your website. It may be someone that's developing your logo. It may be a friend that's helping you write copy. It may be the investor. Anybody, any of your strategic partners. Let me walk through what I call the communications platform. First of all, and again, it's just a one-pager. It won't take a lot of time, and I think at one of these breakout sessions, I think it'd be important for us to do it. But it's really just to describe your company or your service. What are you offering? Secondly, Mark talked about the audience, your target audience, both primary and secondary. Next, I would talk about the desires and needs of those audiences. Put this in writing. We all know it up here, but it's important we put it in writing, because again, you want to share this with those that are helping you build that brand. Then, what's your point of difference? We talk about that all the time, but put it in writing. 2 or 3 things that make you different from other products or services that are being offered in the marketplace. Then, features and supporting facts. What I mean by that is, once you have those points of difference, give me some proof. Give me some examples of how you say you're different. Okay? Next, key messages. Now, some of you will say, wait a minute, I'm not a copywriter. In your own words, this won't be the words you use externally. Try to describe what your product or service does, what you want to communicate to your target audience in your own words. Then, from the key messages, you want to have a call to action. When I say call to action, what do you want the audience to do? So when you're communicating in an email or your website or just in general marketing, what do you want them to do? Do you want them to first get on a webinar, maybe do a demo of your product? Half the time, if they get halfway to the demo, you're halfway there with that client. What do you want them to do? But to write down, again, some of the things you'd like the audience that's listening to your story, what do you want them to do? And then finally, as you're out meeting with investors and meeting out with friends and those that are assisting you in developing and socializing your brand and your product, find out what questions they're asking. What questions do they have about your product or your service? Write those down and then start answering those questions. Because if they've asked them, somebody else will be asking them as well. Put it in writing. So this, again, is a communication platform, I would suggest. Simple tool to be able to provide your strategic partners, as well as yourself, some help to be able to start developing your external messaging and developing that brand, more importantly. Okay? Developing a name. Let me give you an example. As Mary Louise said, I was in the bakery industry. There was a company called, how many of you ever heard of Campbell Taggart? Campbell Taggart was an Anheuser-Busch company that was a bakery, actually. Some of the brands you'll recognize were Colonial Bread, Grant's Farm. Camel Taggart had been around for 100 years. We as marketers decided we were trying to really target those that are interested in a healthier bread bakery product. So we were looking to change the name to Earth Grains. My gosh, we got pushback from the bakers who had been there for 100 years probably, and said, what, you can't call the company Earth Grains. We've been known as Camel Taggart forever. Well, we did some market research and found out, believe it or not, that most people thought Earth Grains had been around 100 years and Camel Taggart was a soup company. So we were able to take that take. But there again, you want to make sure your positioning matches your name. But Camel Taggart, again, had no recognition because, again, people thought it was a soup company. But when they thought of Earth Grains, even though it had only been around a couple months, they automatically thought of fresh, healthy bakery product. So it's important that you have your positioning and your name identified. Select a name early in the process. When I was in the corporate world, I don't know how many times we'd have a new product or new service come out and they'd call it Project X. And believe it or not, sometimes that stuck out in the marketplace and we had to rescind it and said, it's not really called Project X. You know, so it's important that when you develop a name for your product or your service or your company, you develop it early on and start using it right away. Because once it's out in the marketplace, it's very hard to rescind. Pick a name that reflects your brand. We already talked about that. Something that is web ready and rich. So obviously when somebody's searching for your product or service, it's always advantageous to try to incorporate in your name one of those words, not always. Avoid being too descriptive. Sometimes when you're naming a product or a service or your company, it could be an abstract name like Acura, or it could be a non-descriptive name. But most importantly, don't use acronyms. I think we all know that by now. Try not to use acronyms. Yes, there's a question in the back.
What happens when you develop a name like Xerox or Kleenex and it gets taken over so that you're no longer associated with it?
So the question is, what if you have a name like Xerox or Kleenex and it gets taken over and there's no more association?
By the market. I mean, people say Xerox this.
In other words, it becomes a generic term.
That's a best case scenario, isn't it?
Harry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, so through overuse, terms can become generic. So, if you effectively monitor the use of your brand name and are really, really, careful about it, you can legally prevent that from happening.
Yeah, and you can do Google, but you can set it up so you get Google alerts anytime anybody uses that name. So we did that at Sara Lee. Anytime any of our brand products, we had a Google alert that we were notified somebody used the name. Good question, though. Okay? I always say when you're thinking of a name, and how many of you have a name already for your product or your service or company? Okay? So probably about a little over a half. Even if you have a name, I always suggest doing what I call grandma research. Now, it's not going out and asking your grandma. Sorry. But what it is it's really doing some walk-around research with those that are stakeholders, those that may potentially buy your product or your service. So what I would do is I'd take that communications platform and I'd give them a list of ideas of names that you have for your company or your product or your services and ask them how closely does that communications platform match the names that you're considering. Okay? It doesn't cost you a lot. But again, reach out to those people that are most likely to buy your product. I'll never forget one time there was a CFO who said, why are people spending so much money on car ads? And the ad agency said, well, are you in the market for a car? And he said, no. Well, that's why you're not looking at those commercials, which is smart. So you want to make sure that you ask those people that are potential buyers of your product or your service. Okay? But you still, if you want, you can ask your grandma. Okay? Conduct a web and domain search so you make sure you're unique. You can go to the U.S. Patent and Trademark online search tool to see if initially you're okay to use that name. Obviously, what I'd always suggest is get with your legal advisor, though, before you do anything, and then finally register the product and protect it. What makes a good logo? Let me go back to my Earth Grains example. Again, we wanted to project that we now have a bakery product that was healthy, good for you. So within the logo, we actually had a sunshine, we had wheat. We showed in our logo that this was a healthy product, a baked good product. So sometimes it's important that you incorporate into your logo, into your name, what you do. Make it easy for the audience to understand what you do, what differentiates you as well. First of all, make sure, and this is sometimes something people always forget, they'll come up with a great logo. They had a friend do it for $5. It looks beautiful, and then they start slapping it on everything. It's important that you try that logo out on everything from a business card to a poster to the website. It may look great on a poster, but if you make it small and put it on a business card, it may not work. So it's important that you use that logo everywhere, okay? I strongly encourage you not to use clip art. If you're going to invest in anything, invest in doing a logo and doing it right. There's plenty of agencies and freelancers that do it very inexpensively that do this all the time. They know how to do it right. So I would invest in using either a freelance designer or an agency that does this all the time. They can assist you. And you also want to be able to build a relationship with the designer. You're going to need design work past the logo. So build that relationship, but don't use clip art. I would say keep the logo clean and simple. Nowadays, with all the mobile devices, you want to make sure that it can be used and seen on multiple devices. So keep it clean, simple. Also, when you're looking to have outside help, even though you may not be a designer, do we have any designers here? We have one, two, so I don't want to offend you. But we do have a couple designers. But let's say you're not a designer. I don't expect you to sketch something out and be a Van Gogh, but sketch an idea of what you'd like. If you don't even want to sketch, go find some logos in other industries or outside your industry that you like and bring those to the designer. Say, this is what I'm looking for, the feel and look. But make sure they also have that communications platform because it's important for them to see that. Don't assume that even a designer doesn't need that information. They need that in order to be able to develop that for you. Optional taglines. Let me ask you again another question. Collier's Turley Martin Tucker. Who knows, has anybody ever heard of Collier's Turley Martin Tucker? Okay. What do you think Collier's Turley Martin Tucker, and they no longer are Collier's Turley Martin Tucker, but for years they were in St. Louis. What do you think they do?
Attorneys.
Phyllis?
Real estate.
Commercial real estate. I was working for them for 5 years, and I don't know how many people came up to me and said, even though they've been around for years, do you work at a law firm? So it was important for us as a marketer to make sure we associate commercial real estate with Collier's Turley Martin Tucker. I didn't want anybody to think I was a lawyer and ask me a difficult question. That was the real reason. But it is important that you consider a tagline. And sometimes it is because it provides a clear message. It helps provide value to your clients. It helps communicate your differentiation and helps inspire and show personality. I'm not saying it's always mandatory, but it does help describe what you do. Nowadays, people just tell me what it is. I have a little exercise. I'm going to read a tagline and ask you to tell me what the product is. So just raise your hand. Tastes great, less filling. Yes?
Miller Lite.
Miller Lite. What about the ultimate driving machine? BMW. Just do it. Nike. Don't leave home without it. Good. And finally, we try harder. Avis, correct. So what I'm saying is a lot of these companies that have been very successful are using taglines. It's to, again, to communicate not only the positioning, but what they do sometimes. And especially as you're starting out, you want to be able to communicate your position and what services, what benefits you offer, okay? My last point is your logo can be used with or without a tagline. Sometimes you're going to have your logo this small, and if your tagline isn't legible, it doesn't make sense to put it. So if you have a tagline, don't feel like you're obligated all the time to use it, especially if it's not legible. Okay? So tonight we're really talking about how you can build your marketing plan. Mark talked about the market. We're going to have someone come up, Chris, talk about position. Amy's going to be talking about your elevator pitch. What today I tried to do is give you a glimpse of how you build your brand, give you a worksheet. Week 7, we're going to talk even more about communicating and building that messaging. But I want to just leave you with a couple reminders of things that you can do right now to build your brand. 1, develop the one-page communication platform. Really, your value proposition, include your features, your benefits, and give that to those that are assisting you in building the brand and building your external messaging. Create a company name that reflects the brand. Make sure it clears a web and domain search. As you create a company name, make sure you make it easy and test it. Okay? Have a logo design. I strongly encourage you, again, don't use clip art. Use somebody that's legit, that has done this time and time again, and test that with the concepts. And finally, consider a tagline. In most cases, it helps you further define your positioning and what you do. Okay. Before I leave you, the most important thing, if you can remember anything, is when you develop that brand, use it consistently in everything you do. You'll see in the corporate environment, they have marketers that they call the brand police. Well, the reason they're doing that, to make sure that companies use their branding and their messaging consistently, is because then it's easier for the customer to understand and be able to do what you just did with Hershey and Ghirardelli. Really regurgitate back what that branding is. Okay. If you have any other questions about branding, I'm here for, the 12 weeks. Just let me know, or I have my number up here as well. Any questions? Yes?
This isn't really a question, but it's something that I found through trying to develop a logo, is be careful about what you're using from the internet, because if there's watermarks on it, drill into it, check the site, see if what you're looking at is available to be used.
Good suggestion. So what Claire said is make sure whatever you pull off the internet, that it's clear to use, it doesn't have any watermarks. That's a great idea. Any other questions? Yes?
In the early stages, what is the best way to protect and register and protect our brand, our logo?
Yeah. Here's my suggestion. First and foremost, first I would make sure it's clear, initial clear, then I would get a legal advisor. But Harry, anybody else, speak up. But I would definitely bring in your lawyer to double check to make sure it's clear. When you do initial search, that doesn't mean it hasn't been used.
I have it created, so I want to protect it.
Yeah. Harry or anybody else have any other suggestions that's already been through it? Yes.
Go to the trademark office and do a search there to see if there's anything close by, because we have gotten a cease and desist letter from Big Cross Industrials because of our original logo, it had a cross in it, just for a cross. Didn't even use the same color.
Where did you search?
I can send you the URL. It's the Patent and Trademark Office.
So I encourage you, those that have already gone through the process of developing a logo, a tagline, some messaging, to share, obviously, like you have today. One other question, Claire.
Oh, well, it was just another thing with this. When you're online, you can go to domain providers and check the names. I think that's an easy way to like get your foot wet and see
Yes.
if the domain is available.
Right. Good.
GoDaddyRegister.com
Mhm.
and Whois is part of both of those. So you just do domain search and you'll come up with a list of companies, and you can type in the name for trial reasons and see if it's already being used.
Great.
And there's no charge.
Great. Good. Well, thank you. And I'm going to pass around. Actually, I have more candy, so I'll pass it around. And this time you can take both. Thank you.